Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of What Is It? This is the show we do, about once a month or so, where we talk about either genres or bands that kind of don't fit in any one musical place. So we're kind of going to try and figure out what's the essence of this band or artist? What kind of music is it? Today we're going to talk about the Alan Parsons Project. Let me introduce the crew. We got from the Prague Corner, Mr. Scot Lade. He's caffeinated. He's ready to go.
Oh,
Mountain
we
Dew's
are
flowing.
indeed. Good morning, Pete
There
Pardo.
he is. There he
How
is,
How
ladies
are
and
you?
gentlemen.
Mountain
he's
Dew
got his
man.
Rock Warehouse jersey on today or hoodie on. Mr. Grant Arthur is here. And of course, Mr. Brendon Snyder is in the house as well. We got New Jersey and two Ohioans and New York featured here on the
Yeah,
channel today. So welcome, gentlemen. Alan
That's great
Parsons
being here.
Project. Uh, Chieftains, there we go.
that's right. Bell Fountain, man. We got the number one rated high
Dog
school
Fountain.
quarterback in the country.
There
So
we
am
go.
I
You
the only
know,
one wearing a rock?
Scott, did I ever ask you about this? Because I used to play in a band in the 80s and we played a bar called the 151 Club. Do
Yeah.
you remember that? It was like a biker
I'm not
bar.
from here, but people
Oh,
still talk about it though.
it was a
It's
wild
legendary.
place.
Yeah.
Women would get into fights. They would throw beer bottles across the room.
That
Dang.
sounds
I
like
would
Bell
like
Fountain.
hide my bass just to make sure it wouldn't get damaged.
Yeah.
It was a wild place.
It's a wild town, man. It's
It's
wild
wild.
west out here. BFE, Ohio. Not for everybody.
Yeah.
And
There
yeah,
you go.
Brendan, that is a cool shirt and makes me think that at some point in time we may want to talk about Toto on this show because they also
Yeah.
don't fit anywhere, right? That's
Right.
that's another one of those bands. But that's a story for another day. Today, it's all about the Alan Parsons Project. Of course, a band. I guess it's a band, right? It's a band. Kind of got their start in the mid '70s. It's more of like a conglomerate, I guess.
A
Started
duo.
out by Alan Parsons, who a very notable producer and engineer, of course, worked on that one legendary album that everybody talks about, right? Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. There we go. So a guy who knew his way around the
I thought you were talking
studio.
about this one.
That one too.
That one too. Yep.
Or
Both,
that one.
both of them. I think most more people talk about Dark Side of the Moon when they talk about Alan Parsons, but yes, that one as well. And I think based on his expertise in the studio early on, I think this thing we're talking about today, the Alan Parsons Project, was originally intended to be mostly a studio project of various musicians and whatnot. And eventually it kind of became a band. I mean, they play live to this day and they've done so sporadically over the years. We've got a bunch of albums, but here's the interesting thing we were talking about before we started recording is that, like when you talk about, I think Scott said it perfectly. In fact, Scott, I'll have you say what you said beforehand about how it's not quite prog enough for the proggers. It's too prog for the pop people, right? It's like it doesn't.
That's it. I mean, I'm so happy that we decided to do Alan Parsons today because really, where do they belong? Right? The heavy metal people are never going to be big Alan Parsons fans. If you're an R&B or rap fan, you're probably not digging, for your copies of Eve or I, Robot. If you're a heavy metal progger, they're not a capital P prog band. So who is going to go to bat for this band? Who is going to hold the torch and just point out just how amazing this band actually was? It's going to be us. We're holding down the fort today. I love Alan Parsons. I think he's plenty prog rock, actually.
Especially early on, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because I think Grant, you and I talked about it on some other show we did that there are moments in the latter part of this catalog where you can almost call some of this stuff yacht rock, right?
Oh, it's yacht rock.
Right, like Eye in the Sky.
Yeah,
Right.
it's or soft rock. I mean,
Yeah,
they cover a lot of different genres. But
yeah.
yeah, Scott, could you probably say that they're prog adjacent?
Yeah, there you go. Why not? Call it prog adjacent. Uh, and it leads up to Eric Wolfson meeting Alan Parsons, and that Alan Parsons, Pete talked about how he worked on Dark Side of the Moon, but he was also instrumental in making those first two Ambrosia albums sound as good as they do. So this was a producer extraordinaire, and Eric Wolfson was a writer. I guess they met at the Abbey Road snack shop in 1975. And Eric was looking for a home for all these songs about Edgar Allan Poe, like a whole suite. That sounds pretty prog to me, man. I mean, the whole idea of having a concept album in your head before you even record one note of it. Yeah, it's a prog rock band. Absolutely. And I will go on the record as saying those first three Alan Parsons Project albums were just dynamite. I love all three. I give them all a 10 out of 10. Eve was still a good album, but those first three I still play a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, let's talk about the first album from 1976. So
Mhm.
Tales of Mystery and Imagination, right? All based on Edgar Allan Poe writings. This is without a doubt the most classic prog rock album, I think, in the catalog, without a
Yeah.
doubt. I mean, you got instrumentals on here, you got a big long suite. Um, the lyrics are obviously, prog rock bands love to talk about this sort of dark kind of horror, gothic type of thing. Great keyboards on here, great guitars, wonderful vocals. I think one of the things that will probably come up quite a bit in this show is how amazing this band were at layering like vocal melodies and
Yeah.
catchy, and because of this pop hooks everywhere in this catalog.
That's
Everywhere.
where I was going to go with this, is say that they really mixed in a lot of pop into the stuff. So they might be prog adjacent, even got some of the bombast in it that would become so popular later on with Styx and groups like that. But the pop sensibility of what it is that they did, I don't think can be not mentioned within when you're talking about Alan Parsons.
So with that pop sensibility, you almost could go art rock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
I would
You
argue
know?
that's the best tag for this band.
Yeah.
Because we talked about a couple episodes ago, or maybe the last one, we talked about pomp rock. Like, what is pomp rock?
Right.
You could say some of this stuff fits there, but I think this whole idea of art rock, what is art rock? It's
Well,
pop music that's much, much more artsy, right? With the
Yeah.
little pixie dust sprinkled on top. I would say this could be the poster child for art.
I
we
would
need
say
a
so.
video on just art rock,
Yeah.
breaking that down.
Yeah.
But
And-
yeah,
and-
but the later stuff, like you said, it's almost yacht rock.
Yeah,
And
it
it's
gets
soft
elements of
soft
it.
rock.
And you
And
know,
it's
you think
not
about
anywhere near, but it's not anywhere near art rock at that point.
not at all.
Ugh, it's
Yeah.
a complicated catalog. Let's just leave it at
They
that. It's
definitely changed
complicated.
with the times, and that I think has a lot to do with the different musicians they brought into it as well. I mean, the two guys that are running it, a producer and songwriter, they can morph behind the scenes, so to speak, right? But then you bring in the different artists who are of those eras, and I think it's going to automatically lean towards where the genres were at the time. And I think that's
And
why the band changed so much.
I think it's interesting because I was just reading actually, in this issue of Prog Magazine, they're talking about the reissue of the Great Pyramid, and Eric and Alan were kind of thinking about producing music in the same way Alfred Hitchcock produced movies, and that the focal point would be on the director of the film, not on the actors or the producers of an album, and not necessarily, one of the 4,000 different lead singers that ended up singing with Alan Parsons. And it's part of the charm, I think, of the band was all these different voices that we heard throughout their catalog. I mean, we had Arthur Brown singing on that debut album, but it's just crazy. I'm looking on here. I forgot some of these names. Colin, Bloomstone, Gary Brooker, Arthur Brown, Dean Ford, Elmer Gantry, all of the Hollies, Chris Rainbow, Eric Stewart, Claire Torrey, don't forget Lenny Zatatek. I mean, on and on and on. And each one of them gives their own, like, totally different take on the music. And I think that's part of the charm of the band, is that they never sounded the same, not from album to album, but not even from song to song sometimes.
But I think there was definitely an underlying element that ran through all that when you hear it, you know it's Alan Parsons.
Yeah.
And that I think is what they were trying to say with where like a director for a movie, people sometimes go and watch movies based on who the director is. That was the future of music. It was supposed to be, it's going to be behind these really big, famous producers. If you like what they've produced and how they've done an album, you're going to like this. And you're right, members kept changing, but they always got the best of the best. The creme de la creme, would come in and do these things. But I think there's still an underlying element in there that when I hear it, at least musically, keyboard wise, I know it's Alan Parsons.
And and that's interesting because thinking of all the different people that were involved and the fact that they could maintain one solid sound that was identifiable is something. It's kind of like the Todd Rundgren effect, that if Todd produces a record,
like Todd Rundgren, it's like Jeff Lynne, right? These guys who know their way around the studio,
Jeff Lynne is another
regardless
one
of
of
who
those
they
guys.
got there, whatever the output is, it's got that that identifiable sound from them.
You
Yeah.
would think it would vary, but no, it really doesn't. It really,
Really
does
doesn't.
have that stamp.
Yeah.
And there were some there was a certain core, there was all these musicians, but I don't want people that are unfamiliar with Alan Parsons to just think there was just a whole group of new musicians every time. Guys like Ian Barnson,
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, didn't he play on like almost every album, and then you had David Batten, David Pack from
Right.
Ambrosia and stuff. So you had a lot of guys that had been on multiple albums that maybe helped create a little bit of that sound. But at the end of the day, it's Alan Parsons bringing these ears
Right.
onto those songs. Just a collaboration made in heaven between Eric and Alan. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right, R.I.P. Eric Wolfson, by the way.
Yeah.
That's true.
Definitely.
That's right. We did lose him.
I have a question. I'm just going to throw this out there. Maybe you guys have an answer, maybe you don't. But as we look at this band and they get to Eye in the Sky, which is fairly commercial record, and what was that probably their biggest seller?
Yeah.
Would you gentlemen say?
Either
I
that
mean-
or Turn of a Friendly Card.
Oh,
Those
really?
As they
I
got
think
more
here in the States,
commercial.
yeah.
What's that?
Where does
Here in the
Pyramid-
States, Eye in the Sky was number 7, but they have multiple double platinum albums in this catalog.
Yeah, Pyramid.
I'm just wondering, do you think that I can't imagine anybody telling Alan Parsons what to do, but do you think that maybe the record company might have said, gentlemen, you've been putting out great stuff, but could you maybe commercialize it a bit more? Could we maybe get a hit? Do you think
Absolutely.
Do you think that
was
might have
the
had
whole
that have anything to do with them becoming more of a commercial?
Absolutely. And think about the Sicilian Defense. That whole album was recorded as poorly as possible because Arista was putting the screws on them, right? Their contract was coming up.
There you
After
go.
Eve, they had one more record to go. But Arista wanted hits, man. They didn't care about the art rock or whatever you want to call about. So he gives them Sicilian Defense. Here you go. Contract has now been satisfied. They re-signed them, and their next 2 albums were decidedly more commercial. So absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this
Yeah.
album here, if not on the sound alone, but definitely on the subject matter. I mean, Pyramids with the discovery of King Tut's tomb
Mhm.
and all the excitement, the hoopla pyromania, one of you guys was holding that up at
Yeah.
this, right? So it's like that was of the moment. And so instead of writing about something like Edgar Allan Poe, yes, popular and literary things, but not popular in terms of zeitgeist of the moment. Now, whether or not Alan Parsons decided to, or Eric Wolfson said, we're going to do this, or the label said, hey, give me something that I can sell and push, this was certainly of the moment. And I think helped it sell and be commercial because of what was going on around the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Making it more than just what it was.
It's funny because that album is a great sounding album. I know most people generally tend to go to iRobot as their best sonically sounding album.
Yeah.
Pyramid's damn good.
Yeah.
Damn good. I
Those
would
of
argue
you
there's enough.
check out the recent new remaster. This thing here, in my opinion, blows away the most recent remasters. I think were 2011. Not sure when those were, but this one here that just came out this year, just absolutely stellar.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. 1978, there was all this pyramid craziness going on. I remember as a little kid, you turn on the Mike Douglas show and there'd be some dude like bending a spoon with his mind and all this craziness. But it's funny, Eric and Alan were talking about pyramid. They had never been to Egypt when they wrote this whole thing. It was all about pyramid mania going on in Western culture, all this, fake spiritualism and all that kind of nonsense.
Yeah,
Same reason, like they were saying they'd never been to Barcelona when they recorded Gaudi, which you would think maybe they would have, actually gone and seen some of the architecture before writing an album. But hey,
Well, do you guys remember?
Imagination.
Do you remember when you were a kid back when King Tut, they did the tour of the United States with King Tut's remains or whatever?
Yeah.
My parents took me. We went to Washington, D.C. to go see that. We stood in line for hours to see King Tut's.
I saw it at the Museum of Natural History in New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it was a big deal. So
Yeah.
I think timing was perfect for that.
Right.
And that definitely would have helped that out. But that was a big deal when we were kids. My parents said, we have to go see it. We
Hmm.
drove to
That
Washington.
album,
Oh,
that album made it to number 26 here on the Billboard charts. Gold, it went gold. So we got so Tales of Mystery and Imagination is certified platinum now. I don't know at the time.
Okay.
yeah.
I, Robot is a platinum album. Pyramid only went gold. Eve went gold. Turn of a Friendly Card went platinum. Eye in the Sky double platinum.
Wow.
Okay. So yeah.
Ammonia Avenue gold, and that was kind of it
That was
after that. Although still
Man,
sold, only sold pretty well in the UK, but
but
here.
that is wonderful. I really had no idea how those records sold or if they went
Yeah.
platinum.
Yeah, these did pretty well. I honestly think that I'm surprised this wasn't a bigger album because
Yeah.
I, Robot, as cool and very proggy as it is, has lots of hit material on here. I mean,
Yeah,
I
it
Wouldn't
does.
Want to Be Like You was kind of a hit,
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Great
Well, one of
song.
those ones that has gained, I think, popularity over time,
I
right?
think
They
so.
were still coming up. Tales of Mystery and Imagination didn't do that well when it came out, right? It was kind of overlooked.
Yeah.
As you said it was a full-on prog album. But iRobot kind of came out of that. It added more of those pop elements, and it had those individual songs and things on it like that. But they were still coming up within
Yeah,
it.
and they had a label that kind of knew what they were doing. Remember that first Alan Parsons was on United Artists? Like
Yeah.
they knew how to handle a band like Alan Parsons Project. Arista was a little better equipped on the promotional and marketing side to handle that, and you saw the sales were much, much better as a result.
Yeah, sure. And you have to wonder, like I like the Eve album, but this is not a very commercial album. There's not a lot of very accessible stuff on here.
mhm.
And I think when they put this, I mean, this was a pretty big hit for them as
Yeah.
well. I mean,
Yeah,
you
it's a
remember
good,
I remember
great
hearing
record.
Games people play on the radio. I'm like, oh, is that the same band that did those other songs? I guess it is. There's some really good stuff on here, but this is quite commercial.
Yeah.
Still has some of that proggy touch, but it's pretty damn commercial. That's you can kind of consider that an AOR album. And then of course, as we mentioned, right here, it's all of a sudden it's soft rock, it's yacht rock, whatever you want to call it.
It is, but it's still awesome. I still rate Eye in the Sky as one of my favorite Alan Parsons albums. I
Oh,
know
yeah.
I know I shouldn't love it as much as I do. It's commercial. It's getting into that yacht rocky area, but man,
It's
those songs are good.
but Scott, it's a perfect pop album. You don't have it's fine.
Right.
When things are good, and it's a great record.
I think this band, regardless how commercial they got, there were certain textures, use of studio trickery, and there's a lushness and a utilization of technology, which I think followed them throughout their career, that always gave them more of that edge that made them not just another pop band, right? Because I think there is always those elements to their music. I mean, even if you go like later on, this stuff. I mean, this stuff is fairly commercial and whatnot, but
Yeah.
there's those Alan Parsons elements. Yeah, Ammonia Avenue is great, right?
I like Stereotomy.
That's cool, and that's a very
that's a great
technology-driven album, right? But yeah,
Yeah.
it still sounds like them. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't take away the essence of what is the Alan Parsons Project in any of these albums. I would argue even the soundtrack that they did. I'm drawing a blank on the name of the film. Michelle Pfeiffer and Rutger Hauer. Drawing a blank on the name of it. Lady Hawk. They did the soundtrack for Lady Hawk. If you go listen to that soundtrack, a lot of it is just like instrumental sections and things. It still sounds like Alan Parsons Project, even without vocals.
Well, that's the thing. They did a lot of instrumentals on their albums that became as popular as a lot of their, vocal-oriented songs, to the point where they could actually release best ofs of instrumentals. And that's some of my absolute favorite stuff from them. But instrumentals are not nearly as popular with the general public or the pop charts as ones with vocals in it.
Sure.
So you guys think that all the extra instrumentals and things that they had or released might have hindered them getting bigger and or being remembered? Because we talked about it.
It's possible.
There's not a lot of love out there for them, and we just showed how big they were, how many albums they moved, and yet a lot of people don't talk about Alan Parsons the way they do about Yes and other big prog bands that are out there.
Well, I will say FM rock radio around here, they do not play any Alan Parsons,
That's
and
right.
they haven't played any for years. So basically now they're just like a blip on the screen.
I mean,
And it's really unfortunate.
But yet, how many times do people
Eye in the
hear
Sky
"I
are
Robot"
not
the
it.
song and have millions have heard it and have no idea who it is?
Yeah.
Oh, they think it's Pink Floyd, or they think
right. 100%. Yeah.
I mean, because it's very Pink Floyd.
I
Yes.
contend that the majority of people who have encountered Alan Parsons' music in any form at all did so because they were fans of Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, and how their walk-on music was always Cirrus,
Oh yeah.
From Eye in the Sky, and on 6'6", guard from North Carolina, and Michael Jordan runs into the strains of Alan Parsons Project. I think that's the extent of people's knowledge these days, and maybe they remember the Austin Powers reference, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Alan Parsons Project. I mean, that's about all anybody knows anymore. So we need to set the record straight. Their catalog all the way through Gowdy was great. You've got the Sicilian Defense there. I've heard it once.
It's not good.
I've heard it once.
I haven't heard it.
I've never owned it.
What about Side Project Pete?
Yeah.
A lost Alan Parsons Project, in my opinion. As good as some of these other albums that we're talking about, in my opinion.
Yeah, named after the bar they all used to go to between takes.
Who names an album after that?
Yeah.
Okay, so when did that? I'm not familiar with.
Wasn't it, Keith? Yeah, it was a steakhouse, not even just a bar.
Steakhouse, that's right.
I'm not familiar with that one. When was that released?
Oh, 84?
Okay.
That's way back. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But it's
great record.
Alan Blunstone, Pete Bardens, Ian Berenson, David Patton, and Stuart Elliott. So all those guys that had recorded with Alan Parsons Project go and make their own album. I pull this out as much, if not sometimes more, than other Alan Parsons albums.
That's a great record. And
writing it down. What label's that on?
It's on
I don't know.
Renaissance.
Okay.
Renaissance Records. So I mean, that's part of the problem. It's not on any kind of major label. The reissue of it is, in my opinion, sort of poorly done. It doesn't look very good.
Well,
it's in and out of print all the time, but it's a great album.
Yeah. I love that record. That's amazing. But then again, I have a soft spot for that era Alan Parsons. You're talking about that album came out right between, I think, Ammonia Avenue and Stereotomy. 2 albums I adore. And then that thing comes out. Yeah, that was just prime time Alan Parsons, man. They should have ruled the 80s. And to your point, Brandon, I think part of their problem was they were too artsy for the pop people and too poppy for the arty people. Yeah. It got to a certain point where everybody started just hating them, or worse, ignoring them. And I think that's where they ended with a whimper and not a bang. And part of that is, the instrumental tracks, the artier stuff. People lost interest, but going back and listening to their 80s stuff, man, they should have been way bigger because they had a lot of great songs that never got the airplay that they should have. They had hits, but they should have had bigger hits.
And, there's the obvious issue, which we talked a little bit about at the beginning. It's like, back in the day, if you were going to be a big band, and this band kind of, despite this, still sold a lot of records, you put out a record, and what do? You do a big tour. You put out a record, you do another tour. Record tour. These guys, I think these guys tour more now than they did back in the day, which is bizarre when you think about it. But that goes more to, in order to make money nowadays, you have to tour, where back then you toured to support the albums, right? The tour supported the sales of the albums. So it's different.
Apparently they never toured at all during their heyday. In fact, it took
I don't remember
Ian talking to Alan, telling him, look, you're a good enough guitar player. We could take this thing on the road. And the Alan Parsons Live Project was born. They started doing a whole bunch of live dates. And anybody that's seen that show is like, why weren't they doing that back in the late 70s and 80s?
I think Alan was the guy who didn't want to tour.
He didn't want to, did he?
Wanted this to be a studio thing.
Studio band.
Yeah.
Well, it worked for Steely Dan, so.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much.
Yeah, but they ended up back on the road too, though.
They didn't have a definable front person, right? They had different vocalists on the albums. And so who are you going to take on tour? But I also think when you don't have the spokesperson for the band, really. Yeah. And Alan Parsons wasn't always playing on the albums, or at least on every song. So you didn't have 4 guys that were the front, the image of the band. And I think that hurts it in some ways. Then again, back in the 70s, there wasn't the MTV and things like that put image. So
but still, Kiss was pointing the way. Kiss was showing people that image mattered, marketing mattered, merchandising mattered. So yeah, MTV was
Faceless bands did not
Well,
do well. I mean, that there's something to be said about that. If you don't have that image, even for, I mean, forget Kiss for a second. For you,
right.
just like Brendan said, they didn't really have that front person, that the identity of the band.
Mhm.
Who knows who these guys are, right?
they're
Right.
I've seen them in the
faceless. No one knows.
magazine. There's
They
You're
no
were
not going to
pictures
put
on the
Alan
album.
Parsons out there to sell it, you know. But the thing is, when MTV came along, everybody had to look a certain way.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
They're not going to promote anybody that's Janis Joplin, bless her soul, couldn't
Yeah.
have made it in the 80s. You
No
all had
way.
to have a certain look. And
Mhm.
Alan Parsons didn't have a look at all. So
none,
they were
zero.
doomed.
Well, maybe they could have guarded them up, put them in masks or something.
Right. And do you think they got pigeonholed a bit, based on the success of
Oh, yeah.
Dark Side of the Moon,
Yeah.
as this was just another cash in from something that was
Yeah.
related to that? Like, oh, Alan Parsons, he's just the guy that, did that album. Now look, they're trying to make a whole thing behind it.
We forgot to mention his production on this album.
That's
Yeah,
right.
beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
Al Stewart's Year of the Cat, so good. Alan Parsons production,
We
amazing.
should do a part two
And-
of this on the albums that Alan Parsons
Yeah,
produced.
almost
And
could.
what are those and where do they stand?
Yeah,
Because
right. Yeah,
he
'cause
did
they're all-
as much amazing work as a sole producer as what we're talking about here in terms of the music that he actually created.
Yeah, yeah. And every time you hear that weight loss drug ad, Ozempic, wasn't that Pilot? Didn't he produce
Right.
that
And I
track
was
too?
like, oh, that's right. I forgot he
Oh,
did.
did he produce that?
I
God, that's a great
I
song.
think so.
Yeah,
I'm not certain.
all these little nuggets that he worked
Yeah.
on, right?
that's
So,
right.
yeah.
But I do remember back in the 80s, in the 70s, everybody knew who Alan Parsons was because of the whole hoopla from Dark Side of the Moon. And if you have a band that's named after you, a quote unquote band, a project, an art project, how seriously do you take it? I
Mhm.
think it was amazing they had any hits at all, because when I was younger, I really didn't take them very seriously. I just thought it was kind of like I don't want to use the word novelty act, but it's like, okay, the great Alan Parsons has this band,
Right.
thinks it's, really? And
Right.
everybody just thought it was a Pink Floyd ripoff. A lot of my friends back in the day.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot more than that now. But, back then, I think that might have hurt him too.
I think you brought up a good point. It's amazing they did as well as they did, actually, given the headwinds of the time. First album came out in 76.
Yep.
The whole prog rock thing was done,
Done
basically.
by
So
then,
they had to come up with their own lane to figure it out. But it was a weird time, and you had a band with zero identity. You had a band with interchanging members from album to album, and a band with like I said before, 4,000 different lead singers. How does a brain latch on to that band?
On paper, Scott, on paper, it doesn't look very
absolutely should not work, right? But somehow,
Shouldn't
some
work.
way, it totally did. They sold a bunch of records, and we're here promoting them, honoring them, preserving the great legacy of the great Alan Parsons Project. Because I'm looking at their discography right now, and barring that Sicilian Defense, which was obvious, it's even named in such a way, right? What's the Sicilian Defense, right? I mean, he's telling you right away. This is a joke, right? This is a blocking move. We're blocking Clive Davis and Arista from doing the nastiness they want to do. But Tales, Mystery and Imagination, I, Robot, come on, man. Pyramid, Eve, Turn of a Friendly Card, Eye in the Sky, Ammonia Avenue, Vulture Culture, Stereotomy, and Dowdy. Those are all great albums, every one of them. I love all those. So yeah, Sicilian Defense, the less we say about the better.
I know. And they're all really good sounding albums too, obviously.
They better be.
They better
Even,
be.
I don't know if you guys have heard the more recent stuff that he's done. He
I
hasn't
haven't.
using the project name
Yeah.
anymore. That's pretty decent as well. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. The latest album is absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good record. His last two have actually been really, really solid. So I've been
Absolutely fantastic.
yeah.
So there you have it, everybody. A little look at the Alan Parsons Project. What is it? I think we can all agree it's really good sounding music, whether you want to call it prog or pop or art rock or prog adjacent or soft rock. Yeah, whatever. But so before we go, Scott, what's your favorite Alan Parsons Project album?
I'm holding it right here, Pete Pardo.
All
It's
right.
iRobot, man. This
Very
album
good.
is so good.
Yep.
Look at that
Grant,
young Alan
how about you,
Parsons.
I
Grant?
robots for me.
I'm iRobot too, but since everyone's saying that, I'm going to throw in Pyramid because I love
There
it
you go.
equally.
I'm going to go with iRobot as well. I love
It's a perfect record.
Clean sweep.
Yeah.
it.
Great minds think alike, I guess.
That's right. All
Yeah,
right,
so
before we
everybody can
let
start there that's new to it.
there you go. There you go. So for folks watching, I would urge you to go investigate this catalog. I did a ranking the albums show, God, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whenever. I'm wondering if my order would change now that if I were to do it again. But regardless, if you want more in-depth stuff on the albums and the songs, go watch that. But I would say you have a good starter pack here today to go investigate this band and call it whatever you want. Figure it out yourself. If you think it's just a pop band with progressive rock flourishes, hey, that makes sense. But either way, great bands. There
You
you
got a
go.
box set too that you can go just pick up the thing that's got all their albums, even including Sicilian Defense, which wasn't released until 2014.
Very nice.
See, that's a great place to go to get everything,
Awesome.
and I'm sure it sounds great. So before we let everybody go, let's get little updates on your respective channels. Scott, why don't you kick us off? What's going on
Hey.
over the Prog Corner?
Well, you know what? I'm going to be reviewing a brand new album from a guy we all know and love. Neil Morris has a new band called The Resonance, new album called No Hill for a Climber. And if you're wondering where's the prog, why is Neil doing all this worship stuff? And he's back doing the prog rock. This thing's on Inside Out. It's just amazing. It's every bit as good as the, Mike Portnoy driven stuff. We know he's busy, right? So Neil's got to do something else with his time. And oh man, this new one is so good. I can't wait to talk about it. I'm posting the review tomorrow.
Cool. Sounds good. Grant?
Latest in the warehouse, BM Bolt was on the channel. We have a Frank Zappa series that we are doing that's going to take forever because I'll be dead by the time we get to the end. And we just did one size fits all. And
So-
Pete, we should probably talk about the Yardbirds, which is premiering as we are recording this.
As we're recording this, it's premiering. So for those of you who are watching this tonight and you haven't seen it, go back and watch the Yardbirds ranking the album show from this morning. So yeah.
So that and then the Contrarians live shows back up in Adams. So we'll be back on Wednesday at 7 p.m. We will be live. We will have a big panel and we will be talking more albums. So
Cool.
Lots going on. Lots going on.
And I will be on Grant's channel next week for a listening party. We're going to be talking about heavy prog stuff. Or not talking about, we're going to be playing heavy prog songs. So progressive rock songs that rock, that's coming up next week.
And then I forgot tonight, Tony Dio and the Count will be in the warehouse. We will be doing 2 hours of 80s metal. So we'll be having a listening party.
Nice.
Join, hang out. The chat will be open, and the Count is all over it. Let me just say that.
Count Ralphus, yes, he's always brings the goods.
80s metal, bring it on.
He'll be sitting here. He'll be in the show doing this the whole time.
Oh, bring it on.
Ralph will be headbanging, yeah, for sure. Brendon, how about over by you?
All right, yeah. So you guys can just find me under my name, but I've got a few reviews as well. Just did White Snake's Into the Light box set. I also will be posting a review breaking down the remix of the Queen One, the debut studio album. And then on Tuesday, to tie in with the upcoming election that we got going on, the dumpster fire that it is on November 5th, I'm talking about whether or not politics should be in music. So that
Whoa.
Yeah. Tune in on Tuesday on my channel when that goes up.
Wow.
Nice.
Some views on that one for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of coming up here on SOT, so I'll be reviewing this week on Wednesday. Look for the new release from Chris Herron, guitar player from Tiles, hiding in plain sight. He's got playing on this album. I'm going to read you the guest list. Peter Frampton, Alex Lifeson, Martin Barr, Dawn Perry, John O'Hara from Jethro Tull, the two guys from Crown Lands, Michael Sadler from Saga, Colin Edwin, Randy McStein from Porcupine Tree, Tim Bonus from No Man, and Kim Mitchell from Max Webster, all guest starring with Chris on his new solo record, as well as a review of the new solo album from Jordan Rudess. So that's all coming up this week here on the channel. And we've got tomorrow night, Hudson Valley Squares. We're doing another album war. This will be classic doom metal debuts. So we've got the 5 albums, the debuts from Cathedral, Trouble, Saint Vitus, Pentagram, and Candlemass, all going head to head.
Cool.
That's happening tomorrow night on the Hudson Valley Squares. So stay tuned for that and more this week. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as a post. And please do hit the like button before you leave. I think next month, we've talked about it here amongst the four of us, we're going to be doing a show on kind of like one album wonders, right, Brendon? I think that was true. Yes. So that's going to be coming up next month. So stay tuned for that. Yeah. So that should be lots of fun. So bands that only ever released one album, and we'll be talking about it. And there you go, right? We just talked about one of them today.
Kick that off already.
Yeah, right.
Till then, for Brendon Snyder, Grant, and Scott, I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you all later here on What Is It next time. Take care. Bye-bye.